Story 1. This happened in the mid-2000s when I worked at a housing facility for people with mental illnesses. My shift was from 4 p.m. to midnight. At the time, I had just graduated college and had taken a few days off to celebrate with my family. The story begins when I returned to work after my time off. Now, on to the story. I came into work on a Friday, and my supervisor informed me that I'd be working alone, which wasn't uncommon. They also told me that client, our most problematic client, had finally been removed from the facility. Client refused to follow the rules, often attacked both clients and staff, and was notorious in the community for causing trouble, particularly targeting people who weren't white. I should mention that I'm African American. That evening went smoothly. The clients took their evening medications, watched TV, and made requests for their next shopping trip. It was shaping up to be one of the best shifts ever. Around 11 p.m., I was packing up to go home when I saw a deputy's squad car pull into our driveway. A few minutes later, Karen Deputy, the deputy, walked in with a stern look on her face, and behind her was client. Sensing that things were about to go sideways, I immediately pulled out the client's records to start taking notes. Karen Deputy, are you in charge here? Me, no, officer. Can I help you with something? Karen Deputy, this lady says she lives here, but she also says she's not allowed to return. Now, most of the deputies knew client and were familiar with our facility's policies, but Karen Deputy seemed new and unaware. I calmly explained that while client had been removed, the removal was temporary and client could return after a few days. Karen Deputy? Well, that doesn't sound right. Client shouldn't be removed if she's unaware of her actions. Me. This decision was made by my supervisors. I have no say in it. Karen Deputy, I think you should admit her back. Me? I'm sorry, but I can't. I don't have the authority to do that. Karen Deputy, call your supervisors. It was clear Karen Deputy wasn't going to drop the issue, so I called my supervisor. Keep in mind, it's now around 11:30 p.m., and they were likely asleep. Still, they answered, and I explained the situation before handing the phone to Karen Deputy. Just then, my midnight relief, arrived and sat down to observe what was happening. After speaking with my supervisor, Karen Deputy handed the phone back to me. I was told by my supervisor that everything was fine and to proceed as usual. Karen Deputy, do you have someone higher up than them? Me. Yes. Karen Deputy, call them. I don't agree with that one's answer. Midnight relief staff and I exchanged puzzled glances, but I complied. I called my boss's boss. It's now midnight, and after about 8 rings, they picked up. I explained the situation again and handed the phone to Karen Deputy. Once more, Karen Deputy was told about our policies, and she was informed that client wasn't allowed back until a specific date. Karen Deputy, is there someone even higher than them? Me. Now shocked, yes, but they're on vacation, out of state. Karen Deputy, call them. I'm not leaving until I hear something that makes sense. At this point, midnight relief staff, now visibly annoyed, stepped in. Midnight relief staff, ma'am, you've spoken to both of our supervisors, and they've explained the policies to you. What more do you want us to do? Karen Deputy, I want to know what gives you the right to kick someone out when they clearly need help. Me, grabbing my things and standing up, both supervisors have given you the answer. I've been instructed to go home, but you can come by tomorrow if... Karen Deputy, blocking the door and reaching for her cuffs, then I'll have to arrest you. I was absolutely terrified. I had never been told by a police officer that I might be arrested, and being in my early 20s, I had no idea what to do. Midnight relief staff, looking furious, ma'am, you can't do that. Karen Deputy, if he doesn't cooperate, I'll arrest him for noncompliance. This facility needs to be investigated. Frantic, I called our head of program, who was on vacation. Meanwhile, midnight relief staff was on the phone with our supervisors, who tried to reason with Karen Deputy. Finally, I reached the head of program, explained the situation, and handed the phone to Karen Deputy. It was now 1 a.m. After speaking to my third supervisor, Karen Deputy handed me back the phone. I thought it was finally over, but then Karen Deputy announced. Karen Deputy, I'm calling for backup. Me and Midnight Relief staff, in disbelief. Why? Karen Deputy, none of your supervisors understand that I have to report this as a crime, and you pointing at me need to be brought in for questioning. At this point, Midnight Relief staff was furious, and I was completely scared out of my mind. About 30 minutes later, another squad car pulled up. Karen Deputy walked outside and told me to come out as well. Midnight Relief staff came with me. The new deputies arrived, and one of them immediately recognized me. High school deputy, hey, didn't we go to school together? How are you? Me, scared. High school deputy looked concerned, and then turned to his supervisor, lead deputy, who had dealt with client before. I let out a sigh of relief. Lead deputy, what's going on here? Karen Deputy explained the situation, accusing me of not cooperating with her investigation. After listening, Lead Deputy came over to talk to me. Lead Deputy, go gather your things. You're free to go home. Karen Deputy, what? Why? Lead Deputy, he was following orders. I know this place and the clients here. They have rules, and if client doesn't follow them, which they don't, since we're called here daily for it, they can be removed. I wasted no time. I quickly grabbed my things and headed for my car. As I was leaving, Karen Deputy approached me. Karen Deputy, glaring at me, if it were up to me, you'd be in jail. High school deputy, quietly, to me, don't worry. Lead Deputy knows what happened. You're in the clear. In the end, I was investigated and found innocent. Karen Deputy, from what I understand, was suspended for her actions. Story 2. As much as I'd like to start this story by saying things like, let me tell you a little bit about myself, or I'm so petty I performed at the Super Bowl halftime show in 2008, this isn't quite the truth. I'm not that petty, but sometimes, in certain situations, the universe just nudges you to let a bit of petness bloom. This is one of those moments where over a dozen college students were acting like whiny middle schoolers, complaining about course requirements. They began harassing me with constant complaints disguised as questions about how I run my class. It was then that I let my petty side take over, and, well, nature ran its course through a bit of malicious compliance. Now, for the record, I try to be a positive, supportive, caring college instructor. My students are mostly young adults, primarily in their 20s and 30s, enrolled in what is essentially a pre-algebra course my community college calls college math. I occasionally have a young whiz kid aiming to be advanced, but for the most part, I teach adults who are learning how to solve systems of equations by substitution. Many of my students struggle and need extra tutoring, and I'm always happy to help. There's one student, though, who never shows up for the extra help. Let's call her Mara. Mara acts like she's still in high school, constantly interrupting my brief demonstrations with remarks like, Mr. Opp, my dad says this isn't the way to solve it, or, Mr. Opp, why don't you teach at a SU? What did you do wrong to end up here? The list goes on. For brevity's sake, I'll spare you the rest. We had an exam, and about half the class scored 90% or better, with the rest getting B's, C's, and so on. Our community college may be affordable, but many students are on full scholarships, so I try to be considerate when grading. When a student tanks an exam, I might curve the grade to help them out. I decided to do that for Mara. She ended up with an 18/25 on her exam. But after inputting the score, I glanced at her paper again and realized she had missed yet another major question, one that should have lowered her grade even more. Still, I let it slide. Part laziness, part kindness, let's not debate how much each part played, but they weren't equal. When it came time to return the tests, Mara started up again with her questions. I'll skip the exhausting details, but her final comment was, Mr. Opp, I saw that you gave me 18/25 on my test. Can I look at it? I don't think I missed that much. I tried to gently hint that she should be content with the 18, saying, yeah, I think you'd want to just be happy with that score, kiddo. But Mara didn't catch the hint. Instead, she marched up to me, pointed her finger and said, "No, you can't just put whatever grade you want on my paper. 18 out of 25 isn't even possible. I need to keep my GPA up for my scholarships. You need to grade my test accurately." Enter pedalicious compliance. I knew she didn't deserve that 72% by any stretch of the imagination. She hadn't mastered 72% of the content, but since she demanded accuracy, I complied. I pulled out her paper, looked it over, and gave her one last chance with my expression, trying to communicate that she should just drop it. But she wouldn't. So, I took her test behind my desk, graded it right then and there. I even pulled out the answer key to make sure she saw I was being thorough, grading it accurately, as she demanded. After regrading, she ended up with a 14.25. I handed the test back and let her know I'd updated her grade in the system. That 14 out of 25, it turned her high C into a solid D. She scoured the paper, desperately searching for an error on my part, but there was none. I had taken a picture of the test beforehand to prevent her from trying to pull any tricks, as she'd done in the past. She quickly checked her overall grade on her phone, realizing how much the drop affected her GPA. Her anger was palpable, but there was nothing she could do. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Sensing the tension, I decided to offer a lifeline before things escalated. "Look, Marta, remember you can do corrections on the exam for a quarter of the points back. That'll get you close to the 18 you originally had. How about it?" She reluctantly agreed. After completing her corrections, her grade improved to 17.5 out of 25. Since then, Mara hasn't given me any trouble, but I have a feeling my semester survey from her might not be so kind. Story 3. Hi, I'm a 28-year-old female, and today I'm going to rant about my absurd and entitled aunt. She's my mom's older sister. My mom is the youngest in her family, and being an accidental child, there's a huge age gap between her and her 3 older siblings. My mom's oldest brother is 13 years older than her, and her sister, the entitled aunt, is 9 years older. She also has another brother who is 8 years older. Karen has always been a bit mean to my mom, snitching to their mom, belittling her looks, and making sure my mom got into trouble whenever possible. I don't think Karen was always bad because I have some childhood memories where she doted on me and my brother, but at some point she became entitled again. Because of the age gap, there's a significant difference between me and her older 2 children. Her son is 12 years older, and her daughter is 8 years older. Karen also has a younger son, who is only a year younger than me because, like my mom, he was an accidental baby. We still kind of get along, and he's tolerable unlike Karen. My mom was often lonely and would consult Karen for advice, especially when she was mentally drained. My mom was going through a lot, feeling overwhelmed by family, friends, and, frankly, my dad. I was also becoming difficult because I was being bullied at school and didn't know how to handle it, which made things even harder for her. So, onto the story. As I was growing up, I struggled with bullying, isolation, and betrayal, which caused me to become very introverted. Karen would tell my mom that I was a troublemaker and should be worried about my future. I always wanted to go to medical school since I was 3 years old, and Karen would sweetly tell me I could achieve it, but then give my mom snide remarks, saying I had no clue about life. Jokes on her, because not only did I get into medical school, but I also completed my specialization and am currently working at my alma mater. When her daughter was in high school, Karen pressured her to get into med school just to rub it in my mom's face. However, her daughter didn't make it, and Karen had to pay expensive tuition for a different college course. During my last year of high school, I studied hard and was accepted into medical school in Delhi, India. My dad was abroad, and I had studied in an international school. Since I couldn't take the entrance exam in India, I worked hard and was accepted as a government nominee since my dad worked for the Indian Navy. I was ecstatic and posted about my acceptance on Facebook. That's when all hell broke loose. One of my cousins saw my post and told their parents. My mom soon got an earful from Karen. She put the call on speaker so my dad could help handle the situation. Karen, why didn't you tell me she got in? Mom, Karen, what a pleasure. What are you talking about? Karen, don't play dumb. I'm talking about Up. How did she get into medical school? Mom, oh, how do you know? We were going to tell everyone tomorrow after we finished the admission work. Karen, she posted it on Facebook. I thought there were issues with her admission. Mom, oh, Op's admission has nothing to do with that. She's been accepted. Karen, she didn't work hard for it. How could she get in? Mom, you said it would be great if she got in, that it would be nice to have our first female doctor. Why are you acting like this? Karen, that's because your daughter stole my daughter's future. All three of us were stunned. My dad, on the other hand, was furious. He took the phone. Dad, my daughter worked hard for this. She stayed up late, took extra classes, and earned her spot. She deserves this more than anyone. And how exactly did she steal your daughter's future? There's an 8-year difference between them. My daughter was in elementary school when your daughter was applying to college, and your daughter applied to Bangalore, while mine applied to Delhi. If you can't be happy for her, you don't deserve to be her aunt. Karen, your daughter will never make it through med school. After all, the fortune teller told me she'd run away and marry some bum before she turns 19. I cringed at that snide comment and was about to respond, but my dad stopped me. Dad, my daughter is stronger than you think. He hung up, then ranted about Karen while my mom cried. Karen went on to spread rumors to family and friends that I stole her daughter's future and that my admission was a scam. I ignored her because, by then, I had little contact with relatives and my maternal grandparents supported me. Karen continued to belittle and insult me whenever she could, but I ignored her and worked hard. When she visited Delhi during my 3rd year of medical school, she hated how well my professors liked me and that I had good friends. In the end, I had the last laugh. I finished medical school, completed my specialization, and now work at my alma mater. Karen still pesters my mom about my marriage, but I told her to stay out of my life. Karen has shown her true colors, and I doubt she will ever be the kind aunt I once remembered. Story 4. This situation has gotten way out of hand, and I was naive to think it wouldn't escalate. Many people here predicted what my cousin would do in retaliation, and they were exactly right. I last posted about my cousin giving me an old beach cruiser bike from his parents' backyard after my mountain bike was stolen. I cleaned up and fixed the beach cruiser, and suddenly my cousin demanded I either pay him $60 for it or give it back because he wanted to sell it now that it looked good. When he tried to get the family involved, they basically told him to grow up, including his own parents. Then my cousin found out about my Ada post. Apparently, one of his friends saw it, whether on Reddit, a podcast, or something else. Soon enough, the whole family knew because my cousin ranted to them. But none of them were mad at me. In fact, they sympathized with me for feeling like I had to make the post in the first place, given that my cousin was clearly in the wrong. That didn't sit well with him. He ended up confronting me on my way home from work, and this time he demanded even more money for the bike. He claimed that since I love Reddit so much, I owed him and a whole tax for humiliating him. The price for the bike had now jumped to $80. He ranted about how paying him the $80 was the least I could do after embarrassing him. I refused, telling him he was acting like a grifter and that the bike wasn't worth anywhere near that much. I reminded him that I had put in the effort to fix it up, while he had let it rust away in his parents' backyard for years. The bike was junk when I got it, and I was the one who made it usable. I listed all the repairs I did and how much it would have cost to have a shop do the same work. But he still didn't get it and demanded the money. He even said if I didn't pay him, he'd take the bike back, whether I liked it or not. I told him I was done with this and tried to ride off. But before I could, he grabbed me and pulled both me and the bike down. I got up and yelled, "What the hell, man?" And then, out of nowhere, he slugged me in the face. It didn't break my nose, but it hurt badly and made me bleed. Then he took the bike and rode off. I'm older than my cousin by 2 years and taller, but he's a lot sturdier since he inherited his dad's husky build. So, knocking me down and stealing the bike was easy for him. A passerby came over to help me up, and I called the police. Family or not, I wasn't going to let him get away with what he did. Fortunately, the altercation happened in front of a store with CCTV, and the police later obtained footage. I was taken to the hospital to get checked out, and the police arrested my cousin at his apartment. He had the bike there, and he had already listed it for sale online, though he took the listing down later. Thanks to advice from someone who commented on my last post, I had documented the serial numbers of the bike by taking photos and writing them down at home, so I was able to get the bike back from the police with no issues. My cousin tried to claim the bike was still his, but I had texts on my phone proving he gave it to me, along with other evidence of his harassment. His parents were also witnesses, and the whole family knew he tried to scam me, so he gave up, and the police returned the bike to me at the station. My boss gave me a few days off to recover. Luckily, my injury wasn't serious, and I'm doing fine now. My cousin, on the other hand, didn't get off easily. When he was arrested, it turned out he had been drinking, so he was charged with theft, assault, and underage drinking since he's not 21 yet. He called his parents to bail him out, but they refused after learning what he did to me. They came to see me after a couple of days and apologized profusely, saying they had no idea he would pull such a stunt. They also mentioned that he'd been asking for money a lot lately, likely to support his habits. None of us know where he got the alcohol, but it doesn't look like he's going to get off lightly when he goes to court. The police asked if I wanted to press charges, but since they already had the video evidence, it wasn't really up to me. My cousin is still facing charges for underage drinking, and no one is asking me to speak on his behalf, which I'm not inclined to do anyway. Since I waited a few days to post this update, my cousin is now out of jail. His parents found out he was also behind on rent, and he's facing eviction because his lease was month to month. He was fired from his job for being a no-show while he was in jail. One of my friends works at the same place and said my cousin was already on thin ice due to bad behavior, tardiness, and repeated absences. Getting arrested was the last straw for his boss. So now my cousin is looking at misdemeanor charges, no job, and an eviction. All because he had to act like a jerk. From what I've heard, he's blaming me for everything, but his parents have shut that down, telling him this is karma for beating me up and stealing from me. They made him promise to leave me alone from now on. His parents aren't letting him move back into his old room either. They plan to put him in the loft above their garage, which is cramped, has plywood walls, and no air conditioning for the summer heat. Meanwhile, I've gone back to my routine of riding the bike to and from work. None of my cousin's friends have bothered me about it, and they seem to have distanced themselves from him as well. It's crazy that all of this was over a used beach cruiser that wasn't even expensive. One day, I'd like to ask my cousin if it was worth it, but honestly, I don't want to see his face again anytime soon. Story 5. In college, I worked at the front desk of a dorm. Most of the time, it was a pretty chill job. I worked nights and usually just helped the occasional drunk student who had lost their keys. But once a year, we had to deal with the absolute chaos that is move-out day. Anyone who's experienced move-out day knows it's like a complete circus. During move-out, the supervisors scheduled extra staff at the front desk, so I had to work during the day. Our desk was located in the main community space for the dorms. Out front, there was a small lane that led to the parking garage, and everyone trying to access the garage had to use that lane. My shift was going smoothly, just the usual small complaints about moving bins and the summer heat. So far, so good until this family showed up. It was a mom, dad, and daughter, and they were clearly annoyed. My 3 coworkers were busy, so it was up to me to help them. Me. Hi, what can I help you with? Mom in a snippy tone. I was stung by a bee. I need some medical assistance. Now, as a student worker, I wasn't allowed to provide any medical care, not even a bandage. Me. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. As a desk worker, I'm not able to provide medical assistance, but… Daughter cutting me off. You don't even have a first aid kit. Can't you just give us something to help? They sounded more upset about not getting their way than actually concerned about the mom's health. Me. We don't have first aid kits because I'm not allowed to administer aid. If you'd like, I recommend going over to health services. Daughter even more annoyed. You want us to walk all the way to health services? At this point, all I wanted was for them to leave, but obviously I couldn't say that. Me? There's also an urgent care and hospital just off campus if you're worried about a reaction. Mom, I'm not driving all the way to a hospital. I just need help now. Can you call someone for assistance or something? Cue malicious compliance. Normally, I would call the non-emergency number for situations like this, but this family clearly wanted *quality care. Me. Would you like me to call 911? I can see if they'll help. Mom. Yes, do something. So, I called 911. The operator asked about the emergency, and I explained it was a bee sting. Operator, are they allergic? I asked the mom, and she replied, well, no, but it's hurting. Operator, do they have tweezers to remove the stinger? I relayed this to the family, and the daughter snapped. Why would we have tweezers? Of course, we don't have tweezers. What kind of question is that? I relayed that to the operator and let her know the family had specifically requested medical care. The operator sighed, clearly annoyed, and said she'd send help. Meanwhile, the line at the front desk was growing, so I asked the family to step aside. When I told them help was on the way, the mom asked, "What are they sending?" Me. I'm not sure. Mom. Well, I hope it's not a fire truck. That would be so embarrassing for just a bee sting. A few minutes later, a massive fire truck pulls up, sirens blaring. All the families at the front desk, and there were a lot, thanks to this family holding up the line, turned to see what was going on. The mom was absolutely mortified. She tried to hide behind her family, clearly embarrassed. She met the emergency services outside to avoid a scene in front of the other families. The best part: the fire truck blocked the small lane leading to the parking garage, causing a line of cars to back up while she got her bee sting treated. With each car that joined the line, the mom looked more and more embarrassed. Once she was treated, the family quickly walked back to the dorm to finish moving, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I hope they learned a lesson about patience and entitlement. As much as I dislike calling 911 for trivial matters, it was worth it to see the look of sheer humiliation on the mom's face, and I like to think the 911 operator was helping me out by fulfilling my malicious compliance to the fullest extent. Story 6. I'm a corporate security officer. At my client's site, there are 3 posts that are manned 24/7, and all non-supervisor officers work both weekend days. Each shift has its own supervisor. The 3 posts include 2 desks, one at the main building in the compound and one at the secondary building, Building 1 and Building 2 for short, and a roving officer that's based at Building 1 and completes the patrols and mans the desk when another officer takes their break. The duties are usually broken up between the officers, so the roving officer is not the same person for the entire night. On third shift, my shift, breaks are taken in a full hour block. Third shift runs midnight to 08 and most night officers prefer having their break after 04. Once upon a time, it was possible for all 3 officers to do this, but not anymore because of Rupert. I'll sum up Rupert to you all the same way I summed him up to my supervisor. He's a blue falcon. He can't stop telling people about how he was a Marine, joined the club. This account is only hiring veterans and former cops. How things were done when he was an MP. He is noteworthy for being the first MP I've ever met that I didn't like or respect. And he will talk for 20 minutes straight without you saying word, and then cut you off if you open your mouth. He wants desperately to be in charge, and will jump the chain of command if he doesn't get his way. He once reported me to the account manager above the supervisors because I took an hour-and-a-half break on a 12-hour shift, which is something that our supervisor specifically authorized us to do. When my supervisor talked to me about it, he didn't write me up, didn't even give me a verbal warning. He just told me to take my breaks off camera. Not only will Rupert spy on and report his coworkers for the pettiest shit, he smokes during his shift, which is explicitly against company policy, and will bitch and moan if he doesn't get a smoke break whenever he wants one. I have suspicions that he smokes weed during his shift, during which he carries a fucking firearm, but I can't be absolutely sure as he uses his personal vehicle for exterior patrols, and he might just be hotboxing in it in his free time. He took extra work at our city courthouse, and he would talk macho about breaking protesters' arms. We have an active bolo on an individual, a former security officer that is making threats via phone and email against the site, and this walking detriment all but stated his intention to another officer to shoot the individual on site if he found him on property. Remember when I said supervisors didn't work weekends? Well, on Saturday and Sunday, officers had freedom to run the shifts how they saw fit as long as everything got done and was agreed on among the officers and patrols were spread out enough to not be ineffective. That is not one officer doing a patrol and then immediately retracing their steps. This was the once upon a time I mentioned where it was possible for all three officers to have their breaks after Zofor's. Enter Rupert. Rupert wants things to be done his way. He'll constantly ask what the plan is for tonight, as if it ever really changes. I've replied, try to take over the world more than once, but never got the full reference out before he cut me off. When you try to tell him what the plan is, he'll go on about how he's fine with whatever as long as he knows what's going on, will tell you what he wants to do, and if you let him, steer you into that direction to the best of his ability. This would waste up to 30 minutes at the beginning of the shift, so it got to the point where I would leave on a patrol immediately if I was at Building 1 with him. Rupert was particularly upset one day that after I relieved the second shift officer at Building 2, that officer stuck around and talked for a while. The roving officer came over and talked as well. He later complained to everyone that would listen that having 3 officers at one desk wasn't proper security, although it was a hell of a lot better than the normal one, especially since that desk was the primary entry point for the building. I'm entirely sure he was just pissed because we didn't invite them, even though the second shift officer called over to the other building and asked him where he was stationed in the Marines since we were looking at our duty stations on Google Maps. Eventually, when another officer did some back-to-back patrols that were less than necessary, he sent an email, once again jumping the chain of command, and our supervisor was compelled to put us on a set weekend schedule to extinguish any contention over the order our tasks would be done in. We were also instructed that there weren't to be 2 officers at either desk for longer than 30 minutes at a time, and officers weren't to come in earlier or stay later than 30 minutes after being relieved. If we had extra time, we were to use it conducting exterior patrols. I was very happy to hear this because it meant that, 1. I had everything I needed in writing to avoid Rupert for the majority of a shift. 2. There was no longer any question about what the right way to run a shift was. And 3. I knew Rupert would not adhere to these rules at all because they weren't his rules. Our schedule ran like this: exterior patrol, Building 1 patrol, Building 2 patrol, Building 2 patrol asterisk, Building 2 officer break asterisk, exterior patrol unlocking 2 gates restricting access to property. This had to be done no later than 05:00. Building 1 patrol, Building 1 officer break, roving officer break. We could do these in any order. Asterisk, our supervisor specifically authorized us to do the Building 2 patrols back to back in order to push back Building 2 officers break. Now something needs to be noted here. Rupert abhors back-to-back patrols for any reason, even if it's 2 different officers who do patrols their own individual ways. When it comes to doing back-to-back patrols, there's some merit to the idea that they're not good for security or safety purposes. However, it's entirely possible for an electrical panel to start sparking 30 seconds after the officer leaves the room, or for someone to attempt a break-in as soon as they see the officer leave the area. Therefore, in my opinion, back-to-back patrols don't pose more a risk than distributed patrols as long as both patrols are done thoroughly. And having two different officers do the patrols changes the perspective enough that they will find things the other may have overlooked. All this to say, Rupert's unusual hatred of back-to-back patrols was unfounded, and back-to-back patrols are acceptable if there's a decent reason to do them that way. My supervisor evidently agreed with this sentiment, hence authorizing us to do back-to-back patrols at Building 2 in order to allow the officer there a later break. One Sunday, my Friday morning, it all came to a head. I was at the desk at Building 2. Typically, the roving officer would come over and do the patrol first. Then the desk officer would do the other patrol and take their break in order to limit the amount of times the officers need to log in and out of the computer. This evening, Rupert arrived at Building 2 at least 30 minutes generously later than the roving officer usually does. He'd spent the first approximately 25 minutes talking at the other desk officer. Surprising me not at all. He tells me he's going to take a walk around the building and check the doors, then start the patrol of the interior. All except one door in the building is checked during the regular patrol. So this wasn't necessary as the route goes by that one door, so it's checked as we pass it. It's also noteworthy that since he was just walking around one of the buildings, this didn't constitute an exterior patrol either. He returned and told me he could take his break then so that I didn't have to take my break so early. I declined because this would have been going off schedule, and I did an extra exterior patrol instead. Even with Rupert's delay, we were still on schedule to finish with spare time. When I returned from the patrol, Rupert questioned why I had done the patrol. He said it was a waste of time since he had just done one he hadn't. There are 3 parking lots and another building I had to walk around because he brought over his own car instead of the security vehicle so he could smoke on his way over. I tried to tell him that the roving officer can't take their break that early because of the schedule, and, of course, he cut me off. It was about this time that I realized the patrol keys weren't hanging on their hook, so I asked him if he had them. He responded by dropping them on the desk. I was standing 2 feet from him, and he was facing me before digging the keys out of his pocket. I picked them up with a typical "thank you" and went to do the second patrol. I ended the patrol back at the desk, hung up the keys, and said, "See you in an hour," as I usually do. No reply. I know the silent treatment when I see it. I'm not used to getting it from a grown-ass man twice my age, though. This was the unmistakable demeanor of a Rupert that was about to write an email and CC God himself. I resolved on my break to write an email of my own. I returned from my break to utter silence. I said nothing. I was awash in the bliss of the fact that this man had finally shut the fuck up. He logged off and left without so much as a backward glance. This was at about 0440, not more than 10 minutes later than the roving officer usually leaves Building 2. My email was simple. I stated that I had witnessed a pattern of behavior in another officer and was writing the email to document the events of the night from my perspective in the event that my suspicions of an imminent complaint were correct. I outlined the events of the shift, including an objective description of Rupert's attitude. Also included were the times the tasks were started and completed, clearly and subtly stating that the Building 2 tasks were completed around the same time they usually were, despite starting a half hour later than usual, and if there was any kind of issue with running out of time for the other tasks, it was not a result of anything that happened at Building 2. I included my reasoning for doing the exterior patrol instead of having Rupert take his break and cited recent directives by both my supervisor and the account manager. I didn't identify Rupert in any way. Anyone reading the email would have no trouble figuring out who it was anyway. The best part is, I never even sent the email. I wrote it as a contingency and left it in my drafts over my weekend. Rupert worked the next day, so he would have been in a position to complain immediately to our supervisor, whereas I'd be back Wednesday morning. The last thing I wanted to do was to start problems where there weren't any, so on the off chance that I misread the situation, and he wasn't actually going to complain, I sat on the email until I came back. As such, Rupert being transferred to second shift happened without me having to lift a finger. I came in Wednesday and checked the schedule to find an opening on third and a Rupert on second. My supervisor, now the only other officer on third shift, didn't say a word to me about it. There were repercussions. When the second shift supervisor came in at noon to relieve me from a 12-hour shift, looked me in the eyes and said frankly, "What did you do?" I answered that I just worked the shift the same damn way, I always do, 100% true, and Rupert did the rest. She wasn't happy that she was now saddled with him, so I just told her that I got him off third shift. Now it was up to her to get him the rest of the way out the door. A couple days later, he called off for his first 3 shifts on second shift. I don't know if that's a sign or not. He's due back later today, so I'll have to wait and see.